So I want to talk in this video about one big mistake that Republicans are making about Kamala. A mistake so critical that can cost them the November election. And it is a perfect time to point out this because the presumptive Democratic nominee, Kamala Harris, just received Michelle and Barack's call endorsing her. And of course, it was not a written statement posted on Barack's Medium account. Oh, but that is boring. It was not a tweet or a post on X either way. It was not even an interview or short statement for the mainstream media. No, it had to be a phone call recorded in a spontaneous way to make it seem like, well, Kamala is relatable. She's like one of us. And before you disregard this, thinking that nobody would believe that Kamala is relatable, that is one of the big issues in this regard. But it has to do with the fact that I see more and more people on X underestimating the power of Kamala's strategy in the sense of trying to appear as relatable as possible. You need to understand that the vast majority of people have a hard time understanding policy, economics, basic governance, and the consequences of bad government decisions. But in the deepest, simplest level, anyone can relate to someone that they find amusing or silly or give you some kind of hope. And I know that you're going to tell me that Kamala was highly unpopular in her primaries and she did not earn this nomination democratically, because there's one thing that you fail to consider, and it's that way that way before Joe Biden dropped out of the presidential race, the main argument of the Democrats are that they are going against the Antichrist, evil itself, the orange dictator, Donald Trump. So the perception of Kamala Harris will never be the same, of which when she was in the primaries, that nobody voted for her, whatever, and right now that she's representing all this movement to save democracy in the United States. And that's why it is so important that we talk about perception. And in this case, the way that I see all these personal attacks online towards Kamala, I'm going to mention the nature of some of these attacks, just like examples, because I don't agree with them in any way. But I've seen Kamala being called a drunk or alcoholic. I don't know if there's a way to measure if someone is inebriated just from a video, but I don't think that's possible or appropriate. But of course, it's been pointed out many times, her past relationships, so to speak, which I noticed also in my replies over and over again when I was talking about her. I also see the remarks that she's cognitively impaired, to put it politely, which I don't know how much more tasteless you can get with that kind of attacks. Not to mention the classic, that she's just a political DEI hire. She is just a box that was checked and part of Biden's ticket. Now I need to remind you that I come from Venezuela and I have extensive experience with populism, first-hand exposure to it. And you know that the core of my research has to do with behavior and manipulation. And I saw this all the time with Hugo Chavez, especially at the beginning. The first few years of both his campaign, his first presidential term, those few years were remarkable in the sense that there were all these ad hominem attacks. And of course, those attacks also included how he looked, if he was ugly or ignorant. You can imagine. The problem is that this kind of ad hominem attacks that target the person himself, ad hominem attacks will make that person's fan base more determined and stubborn in their defense of their idol. Back then, it was Hugo Chavez. Right now, it's Kamala Harris. But it's going to work with any other figure of any country, of any party, of any era of humanity. It is the same phenomenon. The more you attack a candidate or a political figure in a personal way, they are drunks, they are stupid, they are crazy, any kind of personal attack, the fiercest their fan base will become. Because their fan base will draw a conclusion from your personal attacks. That if, in this case, Kamala is attacked in all these heinous and disgusting ways, it must mean that Republicans have no solid arguments to criticize her. And you know what's odd about this? That Kamala's fans will be right to make that assumption. If you see a group attacking a person by his personal qualities, then you're not attacking his or her ideas. It will look like you don't have any ideas to attack. In politics, what you need to address is the person's policies. They're publicly verifiably hypocrisy. When they have said something and they have acted in a different way, or when they say something in front of a group and say a complete different thing in front of another, that kind of things is what you need to address. If they have political failures like being the border czar and they want to sweep that under the rug, you have to address that. You have to address the impact of such political failures in society and the country's economy. And it's only that way that you stand a chance to help the moderate left-leaning voters see beyond the silly dancing TikTok videos. Worst yet is when you try to disregard Kamala's audience as stupid, because you are refocusing those personal attacks on the fan base itself, and it will make them even more triggered about the matter. Now, I can understand that the United States' current situation, especially the migrant crisis and the rise in crime, has triggered a lot of people. And it's obvious that a trigger and reaction makes you become emotional and attack the person, in this case, Kamala. The problem is that this is something that you can use in political warfare to your advantage. If you know that personal attacks from the opposing camps are going to make your fan base more determined to defend you, and you will provoke those attacks yourself. You will do silly things. You will speak in a, let's say, odd way. Maybe act like you are drunk. You will do it on purpose. That's what Hugo Chavez did, and for Kamala, that will serve two goals. First, her fan base becomes more determined. But second, the headlines and the tweets and everything else is focused on her personal flaws and dilute the conversation about her political failures, which is what Republicans should be talking about. Now, in Kamala's case, it's rather easy to know what are the angles in which she could be actually criticized, especially because the mainstream media is trying desperately to remove any reference that she was named at some point the border czar, and it was basically her sole and direct responsibility to make sure that the southern border of the United States was secure. And we know how that went. We're talking about millions of people entering the United States illegally. And at the same time, Kamala Harris has said herself that nobody should be using the term illegal alien. I don't know about you, but if there are legal ways to enter the United States, legal ways to become a resident of the United States, and legal ways to become a citizen of the United States, it is obvious that those laws exist in place to make a difference between people who arrive and reside legally from those who enter the country illegally, and even beyond that, receive assistance indirectly from taxpayers and well-behaved citizens and residents that make sure to abide by the rules, being many of those residents migrants who enter the country legally. And that's another thing that you can use to spot people who want to gaslight you into liking Kamala Harris, saying that migrants who enter the country legally and those who enter the country illegally are one and the same, which they are not. Now, it is also a cause for concern that especially in blue states, the brainwashing has been so hard that so many people still think that it's the right thing to do to let all those undocumented migrants into the country. And they have all sorts of arguments to justify that. Who is going to mow the lawns? Who's going to work in the fields and all that stuff? And this is something that I have to tell you. Some people cannot be saved. Some people are so deep into the brainwashing that those you're not interested in changing their point of view. You will waste your time and energy. You want those who still have reasoning turned on to realize the actual failures of Kamala Harris. So that's why it's so important that you don't use personal attacks, because that is a bait, both from people in the Republican ranks that cannot contain themselves and people in Kamala Harris' camp, because that ends up being a net positive for her. Another point worth remembering is that she fully supported Biden's policy of making gender medical transition more accessible to minors. And this is a point that the more moderate voters on the left, maybe the center left, could disagree with Harris, disagree with Joe Biden's politics about this. This is something that should be addressed to, and this is something that can actually be used against Kamala, because that is a policy in which many people disagree with. Again, we are not talking about Kamala as a person. We are talking about her politics. We are not talking about Joe Biden as a person. We are talking about his politics. This is what should be addressed, not to mention Biden's push to include trans athletes in girls' and women's sports, which again is another topic that not everyone in the left agrees. And that moderate section of the left is a huge chunk that has been affected precisely because of these policies. At the same time, you need to be careful about which policies to criticize, because some policies that you criticize of Kamala Harris can actually backfire. I see so many people saying that, oh, she locked up way too many people as prosecutor. That might be a thing, even if saying too many is subjective. The problem is that saying that Kamala Harris locked up way too many people at the same time supports the argument of Kamala's camp that she's a law and order candidate. You're pointing out her flaws as prosecutor, and it actually supports her current arguments. So you need to be careful about that as well. Again, I say this as someone who has first-hand experience with populism and knows how the game of mass persuasion is played. And Republicans are making a big mistake in the way they are criticizing and demeaning Kamala Harris. Then, again, those mistakes can be as costly as losing the November election. But I would like to know what do you think about this in the comments. My name is Jesus Enrique Rosas. I'm the Body Language Guy. Much love and bliss.